Talofa lava, no mai haere mai everyone. We will begin with a karakia. Whawhitai, Irene.
Whawhitai, Caitlin. Tata wifo ma te talo I le atua. Le atua lo mātou tamā, o mātou whawhitai, o mātou haulia mai malamanuia ne yaso. E wilawa ina whiangai fo isi o mātou watunuu. Ma wawao, ma tapu le nei whaamai, ai mātou talitonu I loa lofa, o lo e whaatasi mai malutia I mātou I o awa lofa, whaatasi mai la mātou whaasoa le nei yaso, whasoasoani mai ma whaamanuia lau fio, o no Yesu, Amen.
Amen. Amen. Oh, kia ora, beautiful. Thank you, Irene. No te kuiti ahau kei te atatu ahau I noho ana kei Sport Waitakere, Healthy Families Waitakere ahau I mahi ana ko Caitlin Macol ahau no reira tina koutou katoa. Awhio mai, welcome everyone to the Systems Change in Action webinar. It's my absolute pleasure to be joined by my colleague in my Healthy Families Waitakere team and friend, Kathy Powell, along with Irene Paleai-Foroti from SAASIA today. They will be sharing their journey of working with a group of Samoan teachers to develop an early childhood curriculum from a Samoan perspective and worldview, and how this has positively impacted the well-being of those teachers as well. Big thanks to my team member, Priscilla Tui Samoa. She's online helping out as well. Kia ora, Priscilla. To all of you joining us today, while Kathy and Irene are talking, we welcome you to put any questions or comments that you have for them here into the chat on Zoom. If you're watching live on Facebook, you can make a comment on there and I will put your questions to them at the end. It might be that they answer your questions throughout the presentation, so that's why we wait to the end. But I'll now hand over to our speakers. I can see a beautiful little girl there. Welcome, talofa lava. I'll hand over to our speakers. Whawhitai, Kathy.
Kia ora. Tēnā koutou katoa. No Brighton, England, me Llangos, Wales, aho, ko South Downs te Maunga, ko Ada te Awa, ko te English Channel te Moana, ko Kathy Powell tōku ingoa. No reira, tēnā koutou katoa. So good morning, I'm Kathy Powell, and as Caitlin said, I'm part of the Healthy Families Waitakere team. I'm a lead systems innovator. So today we're going to share with you an example of how like a family-centered innovation that is community-led and nationally enabled has happened in West Auckland. So we're going to cover how we began, some of the early wins and the vision for the future. But first, I'd like to introduce you to Irene. So she is SAASIA's interim director and lead facilitator, and a community champion and all-round incredible human. So over to you, Irene.
Malo whawhitai, Kathy. Malo soifua manuia whawhitai ne alofo le atua ua mawhai o na tātou whisila whai I lunga o nei pai o whasotainga I penga te whailangi. My name is Irene Paleai-Foroti, or Irene when you use the Samoan phonetics. And as Kathy said, that I'm currently working as a lead facilitator and interim director for SAASIA, which is an organization for Samoan early learning services, or Aonga Amata. It is a great honor to be invited to participate in this webinar, and I'm delighted to be given the opportunity to share about this unique mahi and this unique work. It is indeed a privilege to represent and to share the work of so many incredible people who have contributed their times and hard work as well as their mana, their spirits, to ensure the ongoing success of this mahi. I just want to just to talk about the logo and the name for this community of care work. Facilitator is a Samoan concept, and it was the name that was proposed and agreed by the participants for this community of care. In this work, Facilitator is used as a concept to reflect and acknowledging the essence of collectivism as the core of establishing and maintaining mutual engagement and nurturing connections with Samoan people. Facilitator refers to talanoa, dialogue, genuine dialogue, as a powerful way of constructing, deconstructing, and reconstructing knowledge. It is taking time to connect and establish an environment where experiences can be shared and aspirations reached. And that is very important in our well-being. The logo represents the 5 Aʻunga Amata, and the colored flowers represent the 8 stakeholders. In the core, in the center, are the children and families, and the relationship between as well as reflecting the conceptual framework. The conceptual framework, we use the metaphor, Samoan metaphor. It says that tau mai na ole pua e ula, literally translated, pick only gardenia which is worthy to be in a garland. When preparing for a special event where we all wish to look and smell our best, we tend to choose the best and freshest flowers for an ula or garland. And in a Samoan context, Samoan oratory, when elders want to make a point about substance, they would metaphorically say, tau mai na ole pua e ula. Pick only gardenia which is worthy to be in a garland. So the ula or garland is used as a conceptual framework for Facilitator. The ula created opportunities to establish relational acceptance and connections. It provided meaningful, honest, and genuine dialogue between people. So it is grounded in our core values as part of this garland, of this ula, and the ability to see those values in our everyday institutions, in our workplaces, in recreational places, worship places, in our pedagogies as teachers, in our methodologies, in our philosophies, and our creative arts, the resources that teaching and learning resources that we use in Aʻunga Amata, and also in entertainment. Whaftai, Kathy.
Thank you, Irene. So I just was acknowledging you, Irene, for telling that story so beautifully and acknowledging all of the people that are here. I know some of them are on the call today that we're speaking on behalf of, And so would you be willing to just share a little bit about SAASIA and the Samoan ECE movement in New Zealand?
Whaftai, Kathy. One of the major reasons why Pacific Islanders set up Pacific Island Early Childhood Education Centers in New Zealand was the desire of Pacific Island parents that their children have equal opportunity to education. So for now, we are building upon the work done by many pioneers and leaders of our Samoan Aʻunga Amata over the last 30 years. Those who have struggled for the rights of our Samoan children and families to have their voices heard and our voices heard, to optimize opportunities and better education for our Samoan children. They were concerned about the risk of their language, for children to learn to socialize in the child's first language, and the maintenance of their cultural identity, which is very important and crucial to their well-being. Most of the Samoan people who pioneered the development of Aʻunga Amata were church ministers and their wives, and other women who were prominent in the churches and who were also familiar with government systems and processes. And faced with growing numbers of preschool children with emerging language difficulties, these early pioneers reached out to government agencies for advice and support. So the pioneers started sowing the seeds through church and Pacifica networks, and before long, there were Aonga Amata operating in garages, church halls, and people's homes. These informal playgroups and language nests expanded seemingly overnight throughout the country. So during 1980s, as more and more informal playgroups emerged, parents' expectations for early childhood education also became more evident. Samoan parents and church leaders in particular were becoming increasingly aware that Ngangana Samoa, or the Samoan language, was being displaced slowly and steadily by the English language in family conversations. Some parents, they felt it necessary to teach English to their children, even when their own level of understanding and English proficiency was not up to the standard. So it was that many Samoan children with little basic knowledge of either Ngangana Samoa or English language were faced with major learning difficulties in school classrooms. That was mainly for this reason that Samoan communities were determined to find ways that would ensure their children learned and maintained their Samoan language and culture. And like other community groups, the Samoan communities started to look to the government for help with much needed resources. Throughout 1990s, as more Aonga Amata achieved licensing status, the determined efforts of the Samoan communities in particular to promote a strong cultural focus in ECE became more evident. So in 1987, SAASIA, or the Organization for Samoan Aonga Amata, was established in Wellington with full participation from communities in Aotearoa, New Zealand. With over 30 years since inception, SAASIA has had a solid foundation in its philosophy of promoting the use of the Samoan language and culture, the Samoan worldview with Christian beliefs in Aonga Amata. And as a national organization, it aims at providing guidance to provide support, professional learning and development, and advice to Aonga Amata across Aotearoa, New Zealand. SAASIA is the only surviving member of the Pacific Island Early Childhood Council in Aotearoa, which was set up in an umbrella Pan-Pacific organization. SAASIA has been involved in research projects as well as in delivering of professional learning and development, workshops and support for not only Samoan teachers, but also to ECE teachers from other Pacifica services. So our facilitators have also been doing BLDs and ECE workshops and projects with the Ministry of Education, Teaching Council, Pacifica Bilingual Education, and ERO, to name a few. So as the involvement of SAASIA in supporting and delivering of workshops in this Tafsirwhai Mahi.
Thank you, Irene. It's such an important part of our work at Healthy Families is to really understand the system that we're working in. We're about systems change, and we really wanted to give a bit of a picture to you before we go into what we actually did. Was what was the system that we were working in, which is the Samoan ECE space. So I really appreciate you sharing that history, Irene. I think it's a valuable understanding of as we go on through the rest of this talk today. So thank you. So a little bit about Healthy Families and how we work in this space for those of you that are coming into this space for the first time. So Healthy Families brings together community leaders like in a united effort for better health. And we look at that in the places where we live, learn, work and play. We believe that together we can make changes in our communities to improve health and well-being. It's not something that can be done in isolation. It needs to be done collectively. And one of the key areas that we focus on at Healthy Families Waitakere is ECE teacher well-being. There's clear evidence that the far-reaching impact of health, education and social outcomes from experiences during the first 1,000 days of our lives, as well as the completely interconnected between the adults and the child well-being. So therefore, for us, when we're focusing on teacher well-being, we're also focusing on child well-being, which is really important. And you'll see from the top left-hand corner, we had back from, I think we started in 2017, there was a group of strategic stakeholders that came together, and I can see that Andrew and Pauline and Leslie and maybe some others that are part of this group are here today. So just acknowledging their work and their contribution to this work, was looking at how to support kaiako hauora and teacher wellbeing. And during the first lockdown in 2020, this existing group, we call ourselves the ECE Kaiako Hauora Innovation Team. We were discussing how to support ECE teachers during lockdown. And that group, as you can see up in that corner, it's like a collection of strategic partners from health, education and community sectors who are all committed to supporting teacher hauora and wellbeing. And the group decided to focus on community-led ECE centres during that lockdown and sent out a quick survey just to see how everyone was going. The results identified the vital support role that centres were providing to families during that lockdown, but that also it was coming at a personal and organisational cost. Like they were using all of their resources to support the families where the children from their centres were. So using an equity lens, it became apparent that the Pacific language nests seemed to have the least amount of access to support services in West Auckland. And so this seemed to be the obvious place for us to start. So the innovation team acknowledged that a one-size-fits-all approach to Pacific people is really a form of institutional racism, and when they all get lumped together, as it doesn't allow for each culture to be connected with their unique language and practices. So we wanted to use a cultural specific approach, just to give you kind of a bit of a background of the steps that our thinking went through. So because 7 out of the 9 Pacific language nests in West Auckland are Samoan, we decided to start there. And the Tawhasilawha'i innovation has really created a space for the Aonga Amata teachers to come together, to connect, to share, and grow their confidence in applying their cultural practices and beliefs into their educational practice. And the role of SAASIA has just been completely vital in this. So we're really grateful for that partnership. So what we'd like to do now is show you, like really get the teacher's voice into this space quite early on. And what we're going to look now is a video of the teachers that were talking in July this year about their first 6 months experience of being part of this project. Thank you, Caitlin.
That's all right. Just so you know, the video, it'd be good if everyone turned up the volume. It can be quite quiet in some places, so just bear with me while I bring it up.
And also, whilst Caitlin said we wouldn't address questions until the end, we are interested in looking in the chat of like what stands out for you as you watch this video. What are some of the things that pop up, so we can have a bit of an interactive session rather than you just sitting listening for a whole hour.
Yes, sorry. Thank you, Kathy.
Teaching is not an easy job to do. We work well not only the well-being of the teachers, but the well-being of the parents and the children are the most important and foremost for me as a leader in our preschool. There's a lots of learning, lots of loving, lots of sharing, lots of everything that the teachers learn from one another. They want here to be Waitakere. They start from the small seed and now look, that's my dream. I want this area to grow up and everybody harmonized. Our future generations is very important. So that's me. Now we got them to do BDs together with the teachers. Let them share their vision, let them share their whatever they learn from there, come back to the community and give it to all. Not to benefit one, but to benefit all. So that's what I want to continue. Forget about the money, but doing things here. That's what I told him.
And so it's been really nice to just be able to have a space where we can come together, share, and it's been awesome too that it's been done in the Samoan, the Ngana Samoan. So that's really empowered me, who's a New Zealand-born Samoan, to be able to really be encouraged to make sure that I learn the language and also impart that part of my identity as well. It's the real network, just coming together as one and really sharing our ideas and things. That's what's really helped me with my wellbeing, and that we feel supported, that we're not on our own. Talking with our elders here as well, that's been really helpful because we, like one of them mentioned today, is that we go out and get our degrees and so forth, but that doesn't mean that we have it all here, especially when we're trying to teach our culture to our children as well and to empower them in their identity as a Samoan. So I guess that's what we've been trying to develop, is this unity, working together to ensure that our children are able to be proud of who they are. Our practice, the way that we do it from a Samoan perspective and worldview, is actually valuable.
It's a huge learning that we do. Without this program, I don't think we would have got that knowledge. And those knowledge, it really equipped us and helps with our well-being. We've got something to give the children that we didn't have it before. And I think the fellowship, I really value, and I think our teachers who attended value that. They're looking forward to the next one. What is their story and what are our stories to tell them? So I think that's what we learn, and we treasure that.
For my teachers, they were quite excited when it was first shared that you guys were organising a community incentive for them to unpack wellbeing and what it could possibly look like for them in terms of supporting them in their work around teaching and learning for children. If anything, it's encouraged our teachers and our kaiako as well, working in our centre, to just take a breath and just celebrate and just enjoy what you're already doing. Yeah, and it's really good to have Irene and also Salah to help encourage us to continue to focus on those things and stay on the path of just valuing what's already happening.
Thank you. That video always brings a lump to my throat listening to them. I hope your sound system, you can hear them. If not, you can watch it again later. But it's thanks for those of you that have been sharing your responses to it. It's really, you can see like just watching you notice what they're saying about that, how the importance of it being of benefit to everybody, and that connecting and coming through. And that comes through a lot, Irene, about like the fellowship of being together. Like this is the first time in New Zealand that a group of Samoan ECEs have come together as a community of care. And so that was such a new experience for them, whereas they'd been working in isolation in their centres very hard. And they had other connections into the Samoan community, obviously, but not a specific ECE space. So you can really start to hear that being a place where their identity is valued, and it's done in the Samoan language comes through a lot, like everything is delivered in Samoan from the Samoan culture. So it's, yeah, thank you for those of you sharing your kind of reactions to that. So whew, I always need to take a bit of a breath. But what I would like to do is that we've kind of taken you to the end of the process, you know, like it's been going for about 18 months. And what I'd like to do is to share where we're at, how we got there really. So I'll just go back to sharing the screen and just show you, this is the timeline of events of how this has really developed from back at that point in March 2020 where I talked about, and really what we were doing from the Healthy Families perspective is really looking at that, the systems change approach of how are we going to support this, looking at the whole system. And so March we asked the question around how might we support teacher wellbeing. We sent out the survey, we got the surveys back. We got a 33% response rate, which for those of you that are researchers is the kind of usual response rate for a survey. So we're very happy about that. Out of the 13 centres that responded, 5 of them were Samoan, and that was what started to give us a bit of an inkling about the Pacific space. In August, we started to gather a specific Pacific ECE stakeholder group. Then we were mapping out the system, like what support already exists for centres. We talked to the centres, like we brought all the centres together and talked about, well, we've got this idea of creating we called it a community of practice back in 2020, which is like the standard kind of name for this kind of thing in education. And so, and there was a big kind of support really going, yes please, we want this would really help. So we kept kind of moving forward, and by the time we got to the end of 2020 we had like a second talanoa, and we'd started to design, there was a funding opportunity that came out through the Ministry of Education in response to the COVID pandemic, that was the Pacific Education Innovation Fund. And so we, as a whole group, we started to design the application as a collective, and Healthy Families submitted it on behalf of the whole group. We lodged it for nearly $71,000, which I found terrifying. I thought that was a lot of money to be asking for. And we patiently, they patiently waited, I wasn't so patient, until the results came through in Feb that we were successful. We were very, very happy. And I think the bit that I did want to share is what we'd done in 2020 is we'd started to, part of the Healthy Family team and the strategic working group, we'd started to look at what is it that we actually want to achieve from this. The teachers will decide what they want to achieve from it, but in our backboning role, what do we think after listening to the teachers and what they've been telling us in the surveys, in the talanoa, from all our kind of interactions, what do we think would make a difference in the system? And so we really wanted, the strategic intent was that the West Auckland Pacifica ECE centres have increased access to culturally appropriate support and resources, and that would support their wellbeing. Because what they were telling us was everything was coming, or the majority of things were coming in English. And even the things that were translated into Samoan were Western-based resources that were then just put into the Samoan language. So they didn't reflect the Samoan culture. So we've got a situation where this group of ECEs are being funded to provide a service in Samoan, by Samoan, for Samoans, but there wasn't the support and the resources really around them to enable them to do that. And these are the examples of the institutional racism that the Pacific Education Fund, the Pacific Education Strategy, sorry, talks about wanting to address. So the Ministry of Education has recognised that this happens. We were just seeing it on the ground in West Auckland. So we thought that if we could demonstrate the realities of staff in the West Auckland Samoan ECEs, that could potentially change the perceptions, inform the policies, and that may then improve the staff wellbeing and create purposeful engagement with services and support services. So it wasn't just everybody throwing Western models of care at them, that it was actually, we wanted to shift the perception so people would provide Samoan-centric support to them. And we got some partners on board, Ministry of Education, AFS, Healthy Active Learning, Pacific Heartbeat, AUT, Unitec, as well as Healthy Families Waitakere. We had the Aonga Amata, and we also had SAASIA. So what I'd like to do is to pass back over to Irene to talk a little bit about when you came on board, Irene, in that March, we started to have those conversations with you. What's kind of been your experience of the 2021 period? Is that okay?
Kathy, the Tawhilawhai approach has opened new and innovative ways for these West Auckland Aonga Amata to unlock and accessing learning resources, professional development, and culturally centric support in the Samoan language, as Kathy mentioned before. And the involvement of SAASIA was very much to do with some of our academics through the University of Auckland who are also SAASIA members. That's why SAASIA got involved when I think, Kathy, you were looking for the right people, if I say, to deliver the program that have the cultural competence and also the ECE, early childhood education and knowledge and skills to deliver the program for our Aonga Amata. So, so this cohesive, coordinated approach supports teachers' pedagogy and practice development, professional development, and some of the outcomes thus far include now from the last 6 months, the first phase of this mahi is the availability of culturally appropriate support and resources delivered in Samoan that support teacher well-being and allow them to work more effectively with all children in their centers and to achieve and enhance educational outcomes for our Samoan children. So one of the outcomes was also about the stronger and more resilient teachers connected through this mahi, who have jointly identified the skills and resources needed to support their own well-being and promote the protective factors children need to enhance their well-being as well. So the initiative initially responded to the impact of COVID-19 for West Auckland Samoan Aonga Amata, which saw teachers managing increasingly challenging behaviors of stressed children from stressed families. So we have our own Samoan ways and Samoan pedagogies of how to cater for the well-being and how to provide services that are culturally appropriate for our Samoan children. So, but there were also some issues, Kathy. The pandemic amplified existing issues relating to an entrenched teacher shortage, including a shortage of relieving teachers who are fluent and competent in Samoan. And I'm sure there are other factors that really affected the shortage of ECE teachers, and especially Pacifica teachers, because of the macro decisions about, IELTS, the test about English language. And so that has a great impact on the shortage of our teachers, Pacifica teachers that have that cultural competence, that are fluent in the language, to teach and to educate our young children in Onga Amata. And as Kathy mentioned before as well, there was westernized focus in teacher development, professional learning and development, that failed to recognize the value of their own cultural perspective in the development of pedagogy and support in general in Samoan ECE settings. So the consultation process for the initiative highlighted the lack of specialist support aligned to Samoan values and language, which could benefit and support teachers in Samoan ECE centers. So, for example, the language is undervalued. There are limited resource and limited professional learning and development in Samoan, and current delivered of professional learning and development delivered in English is of limited value for Samoan teachers, and support services need to better acknowledge the importance of the Samoan language for these and resources to support effective delivery of the curriculum in Samoan. So the core was from a Samoan perspective, our own core values as utilized as the core of teaching and learning in Onga Amata in ECE. So, and one of the most important things that Kathy has also mentioned is from a Samoan perspective, education cannot take place in isolation. In Samoan ECE centers, a family is at the core of everything. So ECE staff does take on a role supporting families with wider issues, because they recognize that families need to be well in order for children to be well. As also mentioned by Kathy before, the centers had characteristically operated in isolation before, and they were operated in isolation of each other. So each grappling with the same challenge of applying a worldview seated in Samoa or the Samoan way. So in a manner that met the demands of a Western-focused model for delivery and reporting. So having this Tawhasila community of care, that is when we try to unpack what is well-being, what does affect our well-being as Samoan communities. So so we talk about the importance of our language and culture as crucial and essential to our well-being. And for this year, and because of the pandemic and the impact of the lockdowns, we are going to look more into digital pedagogies and digital literacy, not only for our teachers, but for the children and for the parents as well. So we're gonna look at creating more digital resources so that it can cater for the children and for the parents and families when there are lockdowns. So it's something that is very important in this phase too, so that teachers are well equipped, and also the centers and the Onga Amata are well equipped with the resources and the knowledge and skills to use digital devices and to have these digital pedagogies. That is one of the main sort of focus in this phase two of this mahi. Pawhetai, Kathy.
Thanks, Irene. And you'll see there's some pictures up here of one of the workshops that the Talanoa, where they came together. You'll see from the timeline every month, and so excited on Saturdays, because they couldn't close the centres because they didn't have the relief teachers, and we were hoping with some of the funding from the Innovation Fund that we could fund their relievers, but there just are no relievers, so we had to adapt. And they came together on Saturday mornings, which is a real testament to their commitment to being together and to supporting. And I just love some of these photos where you can see in the first 6 months of this project this year, they were creating resources, Irene, for their centres. They were making the videos. You can see pictures of all the things that they were starting to create in recognition that it's really hard to get Samoan resources, to find them, so that they were making them themselves. And I just love that. I love that they were creating all these beautiful things for the children to play with in their centres. So where's my thing? Just to kind of come back to what was happening in the background of this, really, is that and if you remember the logo again, like we've got the community, the families, the children, at the centre, and then around those, the flowers that were coloured in were some of these amazing partners that have come into this space. And this is really, as we're starting to look forward, we were so excited that we got funded for the second round of the Ministry of Education Pacific Education Innovation Fund. The first fund was for 6 months, and this one is for 12 months. And so we are starting to look at moving forward. And as Irene was saying, a real focus on the digital literacy work. By the way, if anyone's got 10 laptops sitting around, we're looking for 10 laptops, Irene? Apparently laptops are in tough demand right now. So if you've got some sitting, in your back garden somewhere, just not in the back garden, they'll be wet, in your back cupboard, let us know. That's what we're looking for. But this is the group of strategic partners that are really in this space. And I want to acknowledge the Ministry of Education, the Heart Foundation, including the Pacific Heartbeat team, the Auckland Regional Public Health Services, the Western Initiative, Talking Matters, Netball New Zealand are coming on board, AUT, and of course SAASIA being the pin holding us all together. So I just want to make sure that we've got enough time for your questions. So I'm just going to flick through. And again, this is a photo that was taken in July. See, look, I've got my Leon from there, just to kind of connect. And it's the last time really that this whole group was together, and they are desperate to come back together. We were just talking this morning about they were really hoping to have a face-to-face in October, and that's not going to happen. So we're just trying to find ways of how to make sure we keep that connection going. And they're very good at the Zoom. But that's all of the teachers that have been involved in that. So just really want to acknowledge them. And then again, coming back to that systems change, for those of you that are a bit like me and like the systems change geeky stuff, I just really wanted to summarize, and you've probably heard it as we've been talking, but really what we've been like in the past 18 months, we've really been working together on a strengths-based system change approach to shift the conditions that hold the unhealthy system in place. And you can see from this is the kind of, what are some of the conditions that hold a system in place, and therefore if we want to shift it, where do we want to focus? So we've really been focusing in the policies, as I talked before, the Action Plan for Pacific Education is its official name. And they talk about, that plan talks about Pacific learners and families being free from racism and discrimination in education, talks about them being accepted and included, that their culture, faith and beliefs are valued in education, that the families feel confident supporting their children. There are no financial barriers to accessing education, and that the workforce is grown and valued. And I think that you can really hear from the work that SAASIA and the centres have been doing that we are an embodiment of the vision of that action plan. And I think that's something to be celebrated. The practices, as we talked about, it's the first ever Samoan ECE collective that really provides fellowship and service to the community. The resource flows, I mean, if we look at the money, we have accessed nearly $250,000 from the Ministry of Education Innovation Fund into the West Auckland centres, which when you add that up together, that's huge. But more than money, actually, way more than money, and more than $250,000 worth is the time and the resources that the partners have put in. So the people we created a criteria that you didn't get to just come into this space as an organisation who wanted to tick their box of working with Pacific. You had to be willing as an organisation to let the teachers lead what they wanted and not just offer them what you wanted to offer them, but to listen to what they needed and then to design your service to meet their needs from a Samoan worldview. And so those partners that we've been talking about are the ones that are willing to do that. And not just willing, they're enthusiastic and love the idea. And so I think that's really starting to shift the power dynamics, where the teachers get the power rather than all their emails being overloaded of everybody wanting to help them because, you know, Pacific is a target population, well-meaning, but not actually doing what it needs to do. And so this, we can really see in this model that shift of the relationships has the relationship between the support services, the relationships between each other. Particularly the thing that stood out for me is the relationships between like the younger Samoan teachers and their elders. That was strengthened, and how that really started to shift the mental modes, not only within themselves and amongst themselves, but also that there's something really powerful about the teachers seeing other people value their contribution to Pacific Health, and it just increases their confidence and pride. And one of my kind of bittersweet moments is a couple of conversations I've had with teachers that have said, you opened the door, we couldn't have opened it. Like, we walked through it, but we couldn't have opened the door. Like, people listen to you because you're white. And if we talk, it's just another Samoan talking. And that is, that's the bit that really has me motivated to stay involved in this project, because it would be easy for me to step away and go, you're fine, you're doing it now. But what will happen is, what continues to happen is, we, as much as we're trying to shift institutional racism, it is still there and we need to acknowledge it. And I think that's the power of the collective and having these other organisations around SAASIA and the ECEs that can say this is important and people need to take notice of it. So is there anything else you'd like to add to that, Irene, or are we open for questions?
I have to unmute. As Kathy said, that it's very important from the teachers and even the parents' perspective. When I visit the centres, it is very important and quite significant to their well-being that they are valued. But also with the first phase, it has they have gained the confidence to to be proud, and also to to stand and to say something, especially when the Ministry of Education were there, Kathy, in our last celebration. So it does really give them that confidence to speak about the importance of of their identity, and especially for the children that they educate. So Kathy. Shifting of powers. Is
that your cat that's joined us as well, Irene? I love that. So, I mean, really, we could talk for hours about this. It's been quite tricky to get it down into 50 minutes, but hopefully it's given you a little bit of an insight into what's been going on for the last 18 months in West Auckland with these incredible human beings. And we just really, if there's any questions, handing back to you, Caitlin. I don't know if there's questions or anything people want to ask. We'd love to hear from you.
Oh, kia ora, Kathy. Yeah, thank you, both of you. Irene, thank you for giving us the history of Aongamata and the displacement of the Samoan language and how that impacted children and their families as well. And Kathy, you really articulated the role of our team, went through the timeline, which was it's really good for us all to see. And you talked about the challenges as well, which is always good to talk about, and how we adapted, how you adapted with the partners as well in that work. And I love how you outlined the line of sight to what Ministry of Education were recognising and what we were recognising on the ground in West Auckland as well. So all of those links there. Thank you, both of you. We've got some wonderful comments here and acknowledgements here in the chat from Annie Ualesi said it's an opportunity to identify, unpack, explore and begin to address systemic barriers collectively rather than in isolation. And you mentioned these teachers coming together and when they were previously working in isolation as well. So really beautiful comments as well. Obviously the reality of the system, we're often never given access to the room to see the door. Thank you, Annie. But lots of words, I'll just go scroll down here a bit more, lots of words of acknowledgement. We do have time if anyone would like to unmute themselves and ask a question. I'll just ask a question first, if that's all right. I'm really interested to hear from both of you, Kathy and Irene. What was your highlight in the last 18 months being part of this kaupapa? Kathy, I'll ask you first.
Oh, me first. Oh my goodness. My highlight was sitting in the Talanoa in July with all of the centres presenting their the resources that they'd been making. And I don't know, I think we were there for about 5 hours, Irene? Seriously, I think I understood about 20 minutes of the whole thing because it was all in Samoan. But just to be so welcome, like I didn't even need to speak Samoan. I could just see the energy, the connection, the body language, how much the difference between when we'd met them in August last year and started to talk about the idea to the July of them all being in a room together as one big family. It was just like crying. That's all I'm saying. Happy tears, happy tears.
Malo, Kathy, Caitlin. I think the highlight for me was, now for centres to come together, to share, and and it did really, and it will also have that positive impact on their well-being. I think that's the highlight for me, not working, isolating from each other, but the highlight of, coming together and using the core of their own identities, their own sense of being, so that, they can share their stories and share their pedagogies to support and to educate our young Samoan children, and for them to gain that confidence. As we mentioned before, the shift of power, I think for them to be empowered. Yeah, and that's the highlight for me from this project. And working together with the stakeholders, everyone has been involved. It's not just who is Happy Families, who is they were all there to support. Thank you.
Yeah. I now open it up if there's anyone who would like to unmute themselves and have any comments or questions. Now is your chance if you want to ask Kathy or Irene anything.
Or even if Pauline or Leslie or Andrew, or if there's other people here that are part of that group in the original, if you wanted to add your part of the story as well, you're welcome. Baya, I think Baya's here. She was right at the very beginning, and Annie's been involved. So there's lots of people been involved that are here today.
I'd just like to acknowledge all your work. I think this is really amazing. I think also that it highlights that the Ministry of Education and the Teaching Council need to understand the impact of many of its policies, that it's now recognising there's a teacher shortage, but isn't recognising that they contribute to it over the last sort of 5 or 6 years. I think is a really important contribution of the work here that can feed back, for instance, into the Teaching Council's attitude towards language and its kind of failure to be as culturally responsive as it expects teachers to be. So I'll definitely look forward to supporting any messages going back to the Teaching Council in relation to what it's been doing in the past and how it can address those issues going forward.
Wonderful, thank you, Andrew. Okay, we've got some other comments here on Facebook. One from Catherine Manning. Whawhitaitele lava, Irene, for sharing your expertise and leadership. I hope you continue to thrive in this kaupapa. And we've just got some other comments here about thank you to the kaiko and community for standing together. Ka paitomahi. This work is so important for our community, our early childhood community, their children and their whānau, and also yeah, lots of saying it's wonderful to hear from the teachers and of course you, Irene, and it's great to hear the impact that this mahi is having. Cool. Oh, Annie.
Thank you, Kate. Lava. Thank you, Caitlin. Malo le suifua maula malang malo sunga Irene Whawhitaitele lava. Malo le tau mwhai malo le ngalue. You know, it would be remiss of me as a Samoan not to acknowledge Irene and others like Irene, as she acknowledged at the beginning of her presentation today. Samoans who have stood in the gap on behalf of me, you know, my children, my family, my communities, to, you know, hold strong in that position when to recognize and champion the acknowledgement and understanding that our culture, our language, our heritage is inherent in our well-being. And if we cannot bring that wholeness into education, are we not surprised that our children are falling off early and do not engage? They cannot see themselves in the system. They are unwelcome in the system. And so this work is so exciting, and I'm happy along with Andrew to put everything I have to support you in the cause, but firstly to acknowledge. Thank you for being a leader, Irene, and all our other leadership, our teachers, our support teams in our Aonga Amata space. You are holding, you know, you are holding our banner up in places and spaces where often you are the only one. So I guess my response is to say, I'm here to support in any way. Please, please know that you are not alone in those spaces, and we acknowledge and thank you for doing that on our behalf.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for being part of this as well. Okay, we've come to our end. This has been really wonderful. Thank you all, everyone. I really want to acknowledge Kathy and Irene. Thank you, and for sharing your journey. And I really also want to acknowledge all of those who have been part of this, especially the commitment from especially the teachers as well. Yes, it's wonderful. And thank you everyone for taking the time to listen. I'll just close us with a karakia. Pauhihere, pau rarama, pau o te whakaaro, pau o te tangata, pau o te aroha, te pau I hiri nei I a tātou, mauri ora ki a tātou, haumi e, hui e, tai ki e. Thank you, everyone. Ngā manaakitanga, take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.